Hello everyone and welcome to Off the Beaten Tracks. Another video today. These are not from the dollar bins. I'm going multi-expensive here, more dollars than you can count. I'm going to start off. I've got most of these I think at Cops on Queen. This is Molly Oliver, and if you look at them there, I think this is from 79. I was going to say 80, and it's on the London label. And these guys, by the looks of them, it really is kind of like a quality Holiday Inn band. A little edgier than that, but you know, I thought it was a pretty good album. You know, nothing stands out, but nothing's awful on it. Danny McBride, he is another Canadian. This is from '73 on the Epic label. I quite like this. There's a couple of really good songs on this. There's a couple of bluesy songs, I think, on the second side. In fact, I think the second side of this is better than the first, which is a bit light poppy. Now, this album, there's a lot of discussion on the VC about, do you open sealed albums or do you not open sealed albums? Well, I've been looking for this and the other one. This is the Creamcheeze Good Time Band. These guys are Canadian, and this is Home Cooking. The other one is much harder to find and much more expensive, called Perth County Green. So I got this. It was sealed, though it does have the hole here, so it is a remaindered copy. So I opened it up and put it through my Claudio, which does an amazing job of cleaning. I mean, it will take a VG album and make it sound near mint. It's the same process as they use to clean surgical instruments. It vibrates the water and causes bubbles to go into the grooves. And very complicated and expensive process. So I opened this and I played it. And while some of it sounds mint, there are certain sections, you know, not for huge amounts of time, where it sounds like there's pudding in the grooves, where somebody will hit a high note and there'll be distortion, like the needle just can't handle it, where I'm sure. So that's the thing about sealed albums, is that are you preserving something that's absolutely pristine, or are you kidding yourself that that album inside is pristine? A lot of times on some of the sites, I would rather buy from somebody I trusted a near mint copy of something, because I know they've looked at it and it looks great, as opposed to a sealed copy, which they haven't looked at, and it could be like this, which is very up and down in the music quality. More Canadiana here. This is Terry Crawford. This is kind of heavy rock, and this is Virgin Heart. I bought this album initially a couple of years ago from a record store. I think it was in a dollar bin. This one was slightly more. And when I buy records, I really scan the vinyl to see the quality. That's the number one thing with me. And I looked at that thing for about a minute under some hard light, and I decided, yes, it was fine. Took it home to LA from Toronto, and found out I'd been looking so hard at the vinyl that I hadn't noticed the label clearly said it was a Paul Horn album inside a Terry Crawford cover. So now I have the Terry Crawford album, and this is good. Her other album, I think it's called Bitch or something like that. I probably did it, I think, on one of my other videos, possibly. Not as good. This one actually has some really good songs on it, and I think One Time for the Old Times is top notch. Some really good stuff on this. Shame she didn't have more of a career, because really there was some good stuff there. This, as you'd expect, this is Robbie Rocks, and I picked this up. It's called Raw. I think he's eating raw meat here just so. This is on the Bent label. Now, this is an eccentric album. It has bits that remind you a tiny bit of Zappa, maybe. His voice quality goes from like Stan Ridgway to Mariah Carey. is just really eccentric. I enjoyed this. I think Mazzy would enjoy this because it's such a weird album, but not atonal, not totally out there, just peculiar. And apparently this guy plays locally here in Toronto, where I live, and I may check him out. And apparently the band, the Robbie Rocks band, does get back together occasionally or once a month or something to play a gig. So that's kind of interesting. This, I don't collect a lot of this, though I do pick up some. This is Kick-Axe, a Canadian hard rock band metal band called This Is Vices. I like this. This was, to me, a step above some metal. It's got, a lot of heavy guitars, a lot of nice riffs, and a lot of nice lead guitar. But the tunes are pretty good on this, and I recommend these guys, Canadian band. The next band, you see, you have to be careful. Here's another lesson in going to record shops. This says, okay, this is $25, psych, 1969, Canada. Now, this may have been pressed in Canada, but these guys are from the UK. This is AUM and Resurrection, and as you'd expect, this is does have a lot of Christian based music, though not all. And again, as in one of my other videos with the folk band, this rises above, I'm not saying rises above, but it's not dominated by the Christian message. There's some really good psych on this, some really good rock and playing, and yeah, you don't get buried in the message. There's the music holds its own, and this is well worth a listen. And I'm going to hit my first Holy Grail here. I was really surprised to find this album, and it's Squeeze by the Velvet Underground. This is the album that was made by Doug Yule after Lou left the band. And boy, I didn't think I was going to see a copy of this. It's, even digitized, it's very hard on the online to find copies of this that are anything. And the vinyl was really, really good on this. The cover is a little water damaged, and there's a small story behind this. Back a million years ago, I had a girlfriend who worked at this recording studio in Toronto. And there was a guy named John who was one of the engineers there. I think he had quite a career in music and was, I think, a trumpet player with Lighthouse. And we used to talk every time I used to go down, and we'd shoot the shit. And somehow I'm in I bought this at Mike's up on Danforth. I'm talking about, maybe I was talking about this recording studio. And it turns out that this album was owned by John, who I knew 38 years ago, and he just recently had a flood in his basement, and decided there was a tiny bit of water damage, because this is a bit wavy. You can tell that there's a bit of water damage on this, though the vinyl was not affected. And he phoned up Mike, who was a musician and knows everybody in town who plays music, and says, I don't listen to these anymore. I'd like to trade them in. So here's an album from a guy I knew 38 years ago, and a Holy Grail at that. So there's a very happy ending to Off the Beaten Tracks today. I'm going to have a sip of wine, and I'll put some of these songs from these albums down below. And there's also a little subscription thing down there, should you not be a subscriber already. Thank you for listening.